Welcome on board the news track. I'm Rahul Kamal. The big corporate debate on moonlighting is my top focus on the news track tonight.
Tech companies red flagging moonlighting. Wipro sacks 300 staffers. Big worry in IT industry. Is moonlighting ethical? Should companies make peace with moonlighting? Big focus on News Track.
Can an employee take up a side gig while being a full-time worker at another company? Is this ethical? The sacking of 300 staffers by Wipro for moonlighting for competitors has triggered a massive debate. Wipro chairman Rishad Premji says the employees were fired because they were working for direct competition. So is a side hustle to pursue a passion project okay? What about freelancing? Here is the big debate that's raging through corporate India at the moment.
Mass closures. Homes fine-tuned into office setups. As the global economy sagged, worries of layoffs mounted and in-person supervision diminished. No wonder many employees working remotely shoehorned themselves into a second or even a third job. No hard data on this below-the-radar trend called moonlighting though. But with the pandemic subsiding and the window closing in on work from home, the whip has come cracking on moonlighters, defying company policy. IT services giant Wipro has fired 300 of its employees in recent months, found to be moonlighting for competition.
The reality is that there are people today working for Wipro and working directly for one of our competitors. Right? We've actually discovered 300 people in the last few months who are doing exactly that. To me, it's a complete violation of integrity in its deepest form.
With data security and client confidentiality paramount to their business, several Indian tech companies find side gigs ethically questionable and detriment to the sector.
Moonlighting, it's an ethical issue, right? So, we need to inculcate that ethics and being right. And if you make something like this for short-term gains, in the long term, you will lose out.
Service agreements of a number of technology companies are in fact phrased to discourage their staff taking a secondary employment. Aside from employment contracts, some within the industry take a lenient view of moonlighting but press for greater transparency.
As far as I am concerned, somebody meets the productivity and efficiency norms, and if he wants to make an extra buck, as long as he's not committing a fraud and he is not doing something which is against the values and the ethics of the company, I have no problem. Frankly, I'm going to probably make it a policy that if you want to do it, sure, but be open about it. Share with us.
For some industry stalwarts, juggling multiple full-time jobs at once is wrong. But making an extra buck in spare time isn't really, till it doesn't breach standards.
Rishad is right. If you work for somebody else during the time you're supposed to be working for your company, that is cheating. But if you work in your free time outside and there are no conditionalities in your employment contract, it's not cheating.
The double lives of white-collar workers, a headache for employers, or a new norm in the digitized world. The jury is still out. Bureau Report, India Today.
So should moonlighting be thought of as a crime, something completely illegal, immoral, unethical? Or do companies like Wipro need to take a bit of a chill pill, rework their HR policies so that they evolve with the time? To talk about that one debate that's raging in offices across the country, I'm joined on the news track by a very distinguished panel. Let me introduce first Dr. N.S. Rajan, former Group Chief Human Resources Officer at Tata Sons. He's been CEO of the IDFC Foundation, has been Global Leader, People Advisory at Ernst & Young. Dr. Rajan, welcome. With us is Prabir Jha. He's been the former President, Global Chief People Officer at Cipla, former President, Group Human Resource Officer at Reliance. Rituparna Chakrabarti joins us, co-founder, Executive Vice President at Team Lease Services. They really see what's happening in the job market. Varsha Kriplani is with us, partner at SNG and Partners. So we've got a panel that's looked at HR practices very, very closely, is tracking this huge debate sparked by Rishad Premji, chairman at Wipro, on the question of moonlighting, where everyone seems to have a very strong opinion, and oftentimes the opinion of young employees is very different from that of their managements. So let me dive straight into it, and I'll go across to N.S. Rajan. First, Dr. Rajan, where do you come out on this raging debate over moonlighting? Has Rishad Premji and Wipro, have they overreacted by firing employees, or do you think, given the fact that employees were caught moonlighting for direct competitors, what Wipro did is the right thing to do? It sets a precedent for everyone else to follow.
Thank you, Rahul. Moonlighting is no longer moonlighting. I think it's occupied space day and night. I'm neither for nor against. I'm actually on the side of prudence and moderation when it comes to moonlighting. There are multiple dimensions that we need to bear in mind before we take a position. So there is a nature of employment, there is a nature of role, there's a nature of the contract that you have between employer-employee, and the nature of stakeholders who are involved in the entire game.
Okay, so let's take it one by one. Let's start by what has happened most recently, which is Wipro firing 300 employees for moonlighting for competitors. Do you think that is absolutely the right thing and there is no two ways about it? Or do you think that even there, companies like Wipro and the others need to now take a more lenient view, given the fact that attitudes, especially amongst the younger generation, are clearly changing?
I honestly don't think we have evolved to a point where there is a concrete position that's been taken on moonlighting. So you have two divergent views. On one hand, you have employees saying it is my time, my choice, and my need. On the other hand, you have employers saying, listen, there is a code of conduct, there are employment conditions that clearly articulate what is expected of you, and there are issues concerning productivity, daylighting, access to information, breach of confidentiality. So there are issues on either side. But I think we need to find an effective balance as it stands.
Rituparna Chakrabarti, do you think that companies firing employees who've been caught moonlighting is absolutely the right thing to do? Or do HR departments really just need to dial back a little bit and get with the times?
I think, of course, probably I'm not probably privy with the actual employment contract, but from what I can hazard a guess on, the employment contracts signed by these employees are tight enough to kind of prevent them from work with competing organizations, working on very similar project or using competing skills essentially, and work with other organizations. Because that's the way most of the employment contracts, when you are on direct roles of organizations, are structured. Or even if you're not on direct roles, even if you're on fixed-term contracts, your terms of employment are such, the confidentiality terms are such that, and most importantly, the entitlements that you enjoy. Finally, your principal employer are essentially the ones who are taking care of all your entitlements under labor laws, your social security, your insurance, your accident insurance policy, and so on. So from that perspective, the employer does have the right over knowing and having access to that information in advance about what you're going to do, or if you're going to do similar work with some other organization. So from that perspective, if you were to look at it completely legally, I'm sure Wipro has done their homework before having taken that action. Just to stand alone, just to talk about moonlighting, it's a very, very prevalent concept. in developed countries. However, the nature of contract and employment is very different. Essentially, moonlighting operates where an individual is trying to maximize his or her earnings by actually taking up 3 or 4 different kinds of assignment, but each one of them standalone are in the nature of gig work, by the way. These are not really where they have an established or a standalone employer-employee relationship with any of these organizations. And very clearly, all the 5 different potential organizations know it upfront and in advance that this employee is going to be working in different organizations in different job roles.
That's something completely different, and we'll come to that in a moment, where you have very clearly defined key performance indicators. The company knows the number of man hours you've signed up for and the work that you have to deliver and will be measured against. That's a different kind of arrangement. What we're talking about here, Prabhirja, is a situation where you're working for a marquee company like Wipro and you're working for a competitor on the side. Now, you've learned certain skills given your time at that organization. You're using those skills for a direct competitor. Do you then think that what Wipro did was right and there can be no argument about that, before we come into the larger grey areas and how youngsters want to organize their time? So we'll come to that in a moment, but let's just deal with what happened at the moment.
So Rahul, my own take is that any person who has signed on a certain employment contract is bound to comply with them. I suppose, since I do not have seen the employment contracts in this particular case, the contravention of full-time employment of time, effort, focus, let alone bigger so-called crimes of competitor intelligence share or maybe working for competitors, makes it fairly clear that Wipro did the right thing. But having said that, and I'm sure we'll get into a lot more of debate later, I think the concept of a shift from what I call corporate monogamy, where people worked for one company in fact all their lives, to corporate polygamy, where you worked with multiple companies through your career, to what is happening today, what I call, if I borrow again the sociological construct of corporate polyandry, where you are actually in a gig world working with multiple clients and customers at the same time. It all depends on how employer-employee relationships get redefined. Till the moment that that explanation is not clear to both sides, I presume one will have to go by what are extant contractual agreements that were signed off. And if in that case it was 100% time and focus, then I think Wipro was right. But I personally believe the winds of change are very obvious, and maybe as we discuss
but the employees don't really have a choice. You're talking about polyandry, where you can be working with multiple companies at the same time, giving a certain number of man hours every day, which employees would love if they had the choice, but very often they don't, Prabir. And the reality is they've signed up for one company, but they'd like to do something more on the side. Therefore, do you think it's time that employment contracts are reworked to allow for this new reality, or at least this new aspiration?
Yes, I think there must be an honest dialogue and articulation,
in my mind, Rahul,
and people must have the right to then
Go on, Prabir.
Should I finish or? Okay, I'll just finish my thought. So as long as it is re-articulated, reshared, individuals will have a right to either accept the revised terms of contract or they will choose to walk away, and that is absolutely fine. But till that is done, they are obliged to conform with extant rules. And I believe progressive companies will have to debate and think whether it makes sense to give flexibility or it does not deserve to be given flexibility, and it will vary by the nature of work, the level at which the person is, and the choice that finally individuals have of accepting or not accepting such a construct. It is a free world.
But Dr. Rajan, you have a situation where an employee is with a big group, say whether it's a Cipla or a Tata Sons, he'd like to continue. But if you're, say, for example, sitting as the Chief Human Resources Officer of Tata Sons, you don't have any particular motivation to want to change the terms of contract. You would like employees to be dedicated to you full time, but your requirement may not be meeting the employee's aspiration.
Absolutely, Rahul. I think there are a couple of things that you have to bear in mind. One is the fact that I'm employed. There are three kinds of nature of employment. You're talking about somebody who can be a full-time employee, somebody who is contractual in nature, but largely working full-time for the enterprise, and there is a gig worker. I think anybody who's getting into an employment contract is very clear on what the terms and conditions specify. Particularly if I take the IT world, I think in almost every contract of all the major IT companies, they clearly indicate that there is a set of code of conduct in terms of ethics and values that the company believes in, and there are very clear delineation on secondary employment and alternate occupation not being kosher. Now, when it is specified in that fashion, in my mind, moonlighting as it stands is not kosher. And to that extent, I mean, leave aside the debate and the language, I think organizations have a right to pull up employees who have actually not adhered to what they have signed up for.
No, but when an organization is trying to keep a tab on employees to see what they're doing in their downtime, that again is something that employees would find very nauseating. The fact that you've got your HR department or your top management playing big brother and keeping an eye on what you're doing, that also beyond a point can be really irritating and frustrating for the employees.
See, there are two schools of thought there. Now, the very fact that you have a boss, somebody is keeping an eye on you. I think sometimes we stretch the concept a little long because, just take a role, for example. There are three elements in a role that would be of critical importance when we debate this. One is the level of the role, and therefore the impact and the element of expectation on each role at each level. The other is the criticality of that role in terms of what you do, how you do it, and how important it is, because there is a difference between a CEO's work and a chowkidar's work, and the rest of it is a range. The third aspect is the kind of work that you do. How important is it for the organization in terms of confidentiality, in terms of IP, in terms of access to information? So we are talking of dimensions that we need to be mindful of. And I think an organization has its concerns, and they're rightly placed. So till we actually find a balance between what I would believe is employer needs and employee rights, you would have this debate going on. But at this point of time, I believe that if there is separation on account of contractual reasons, I think it's in the right place.
Okay, Varsha Kriplani,
reach that kind of a conclusion.
Do you think that organizations like Wipro are doing the right thing when they take a strong stand? Or do you think that some of these companies really now need to evolve with the times and loosen their policies to allow for employees to do a bit more than restricting them just to a day 9 to 5 kind of job? Varsha, I think your audio is on mute. Could you just unmute yourself, please?
Can you hear me now?
I hear you well.
Okay. So I'm saying as of now, the way the law stands today in India, I think the stand they would have taken would have been taken under a sound legal advice, and I'm sure their decisions are within legal parameters. Their employment contract must be having this restrictive covenants about dual employment or multiple employment, and I'm sure that they have been terminated in terms of those. However, your second point that whether it needs to be re-explored, yes, moonlighting is it's not an epiphany. It was existing, it is going on, and I think it is here to stay. Maybe in certain sectors or certain industries, but in that scenario, we need to rework our ethics, rework our work mode, redesign our organization, see what level of work can be done, how, like the other gentleman was pointing out. And only then we can say that moonlighting is perfectly legal. As of today, the way the law stands, like I see in Factories Act, there is a prohibition for dual employment. There is a Shops and Establishment Act where, the state rules are also formed in each state, and most of the states are restricting dual employment. So if we go by this, legally speaking, yes, today, maybe the stand of Wipro is not incorrect. They have taken a stand under the legal regime which subsists in India today.
Okay, but we'll come into the grey areas in a moment. I want to go across to Harpreet Singh Saluja, President at Nascent Information Technology Employees Senate Knights. Would you agree with what the HR department and management at Wipro have done, firing 300 employees? Or do you think that companies need to change their thinking to fit the times?
Hi, and first and foremost, thanks for giving this opportunity to share the views of employees, what the employees think. And particularly going back to the history, moonlighting is not a new thing. Infosys Infosys founder Narayan Murthy, he was working with Patni Computer Systems when he founded Infosys. At the same time, if you'll go with startups like Flipkart, then it was founded by Sachin and Binny Bansal. They were working for Amazon. And Freshworks, which last year got listed into NASDAQ, Girish Matra Bhutam, while working for Zoho Corporation, founded the Freshworks Corporation. So, do you feel that the employees currently working in the organizations are doing unethical things if they wish to upgrade their lifestyle, or they want to create another organization like Infosys or Wipro? Is it a crime
No,
to
but
think
there's
like
a difference. If you're sitting at Wipro wanting to set up a new organization, that one could still concede as a rightful aspiration. If you're sitting at Wipro and working for Infosys or Accenture or anybody else who's in a competitive space, depending on the project that you work on, that is plain wrong, which is what's happened in this instance. It's not as if he's wanting to set up the next Freshworks or Flipkart. It's very different.
That is fine, but do you think dual employment, as it is mentioned only in the Factories Act, as per the law is concerned? Apart from that, the Factories Act does not apply to the IT industry. Then, apart from that, the real thing is dual employment means working for a company for more than 9 hours, as per law. So, if a person is working for Wipro, he is a full-time employee, and the Wipro is submitting the PF of that company for that employee, is it possible for another organization like Infosys or Tech Mahindra or any other organization to submit the PF for the same employee? It is not possible. The system is...
You don't need to be submitting a PF. You could be working on a contract. You could have a gig job with defined parameters with your rival competitor while you have a full-time job with an organization like Wipro.
No, there are no such jobs in IT industry. Employees are working overtime. They are working for 12 hours, 14 hours without any overtime benefits. So how is it possible for an employee to work for 14 hours for one organization and then go back and work for 9 hours for any other organization?
But you don't need to work for 9 hours for another organization. It can be it can be a job, or it can be a task which involves lesser hours.
Yeah, but that is happening in other, it is happening with other professionals also, right? If a teacher is teaching at school and he's coming back to the home and giving some kind of tuition, is it a crime? The person can work voluntarily for an NGO as well. He can be a dance instructor as well, or a content creator.
Okay, so you make some interesting points, and that's where this debate gets interesting. There would have been no Flipkart, there would have been no Infosys if Narayan Murthy hadn't done some moonlighting on the side. Prabir Jha, HR executives need to get with the times and make some allowances.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Rahul. So, I just want to again mention that, anything which is contractually void for now needs to be dealt with the termination action that they did. But I think the question that I tend to endorse is the world is changing. And I think the time has come for organizations across sectors to relook their staffing norms. I think this full-time employment, almost treating them as captive labor, that is dead. There are many, many industries which actually use employees 7 days a week, 15 hours a day. It's not going to work. Look at the deeper melee that this issue is raising. The issue is organizations are very low on trust today. Forget all the PR exercise, the challenges we are dealing with average leadership and average middle managers. There is a breakdown of communication. When organizations are comfortable hiring and firing as business cycles move, people are de-risking themselves. So from a human psychology perspective, moonlighting, apart from acquiring newer skill sets, making sure that you actually are employable even beyond your so-called formal job, these are practical survival, if not future employability of future generative responses. And therefore, the question, Rahul, that I think that companies and progressive companies will have to ask, and that's the point I was raising, that they will have to move to a multimodal employment construct, some full-time captive, some flexible, and some completely gig. And as long as the culture morphs to support that, I think we are in for better times. Otherwise, I personally believe it's a choice that both sides make. You either do not or will not get captive employees if you were to insist on a certain parameter, and you will get a certain kind of people who are willing to only work with one company. Finally, the reality of demand and supply and free labor economics will prevail. And at the end of the day, there is no issue of ethics. It is an issue of fair articulation, and both
Dr.
sides
Rajana,
then
Prabir
making
makes
a
an
choice
important point,
as to which kind of species.
which is that a lot of Indian companies especially tend to think of their employees as captive labor, that he somehow, just because he gets a salary at the end of the month, will do what you want him to from the moment he wakes up to the moment he sleeps. They're disrespectful of people after they've gone back home to their family, especially Indian managers, unlike say in Europe and the United States, keep mailing, pinging, WhatsApping on Saturday, Sunday as well. And at some level, the current crop of younger employees are not okay with that.
Rahul, in my mind, I think that could actually be a broader generalization to say that every organization is treating every employee as a labor market. Now, I think somewhere you have the option. If somebody takes a stance that I am available for you only for 8 hours and otherwise I would like to do whatever I want, it raises a lot of complications. One is, are you seeking then a transactional relationship where you don't expect a mutually beneficial relationship, or you don't expect the company to invest in you beyond just giving you a wage? The other aspect that I think which is important is that when we are talking of corporates,
but it is a bit transactional. So once again, it is a bit transactional where business cycles turn sour. So many organizations simply let go of their employees because they didn't have the money to be able to sustain their employment. So therefore, the employee then feels, I must de-risk my presence in this organization because kal ho na ho.
Rahul, may I come in here?
Dr. Rajan first, I'm just going to go across in a moment to Rituparna.
Yeah, Rahul, again, we are connecting multiple issues and bring it around moonlighting. The point of not handling employees right, not having an articulated people philosophy, not being able to follow it up through the direction is a larger issue which is not directly connected to moonlighting. I think the issue relating to moonlighting is whether when you are working for a company, can you take the time out and work for instance, a competitor? Now, the only Chinese wall that I know is in China. So there are implicit risks that an organization runs when full-time employment professionals actually are into gig mode. I don't deny the fact that the future of work is evolving, and I think it calls for a time when all the stakeholders, and not just employer-employee but even law, required to actually come together to evolve a way forward in terms of future work. So I think that distinction is important, Rahul, because sometimes it's very easy to actually rubbish organizations when they're trying to do what they need to do, and all organizations are not the same. So when we're talking about labor, when we're talking about slaves, when we're talking about all of that, the classic example I was giving you was that the whole concept of 8 hours in a day was introduced by Tata Steel even before we became independent, even before it became a law. So there are organizations that understand that well-being of employees is paramount. So there is a distinction,
okay.
And I think
Varsha
it's important for us not to
respond
take the
to this. You can't
and
treat
use
all
them as a reason to change what
employers
we need to
equally.
change.
You can't paint all managements with the same brush. And some of this just sounds very woke, but is factually and in effect plain wrong.
Yes, Rahul, what I feel is that, there has to be in continuance with the legal movement, there has to be some kind of a social movement. But the law also has to evolve. Today, the way as the law stands, legally speaking, today, if I go to an organization, I have to give my opinion whether there you have done a thing legally or not. I can only opine as the law stands today. Although what we also advise our clients today is that you have to redefine your work ethics, you have to redefine your work organization. But the point is that today the law doesn't stand that way. What the other gentleman was saying, that today if the contract says that you will only work for me, and the employee has accepted that contract, has accepted that offer, and now it's a contract, then you have to abide by it.
Now, that's a very important
Whether
point. I want to put that question to Harpreet Saluja. When someone signs up for a contract, surely the employee must read the terms of the contract that you're signing up to. If you don't like it, you can work elsewhere. If you sign up to it, you must respect it.
True to that point, Rahul ji. But one thing over here is the contract of IT employees are governed by the Indian Contract Act, and Section 27 of the Indian Contract Act clearly states that if you are putting a clause in your contract which is prohibiting a person from exercising lawful profession or a job or any kind of trade or business, then to that extent that contract is void. So I had also submitted a petition to Honorable Labour Minister Bhupendra Yadav ji that the clauses that are being mentioned in the IT sector employment letters needs to be reviewed by the government. Is there any control of government over the clauses that are being put in the offer letters? There is no control. At their will, they are putting these kind of clauses, and which are directly exploiting the employees.
No, but while you can go to court, or you can go to Bhupender Yadav in this case, till the time that matter is resolved, you have
Correct.
willingly signed up to that contract. If you don't want an Infosys, Wipro, Tech Mahindra, whichever contract, don't sign it. Do something else. Be a gig worker.
But the law is above Rishad Premji and above Wipro and the clauses mentioned in the contract letter of the employees. The Indian Constitution in Article 21 provides the right to livelihood. It is envisaged in the right to life. So if a person wants to earn a better living, no company has any kind of a right to stop that person at that
Basha,
place.
respond to that
They are
argument
just
that
citing-
companies are being exploitative by writing out contracts which are way beyond what the law permits.
Section 27, where it says this, it's not saying it in air. When we are saying that you cannot go into another employment, I am already employing you. I'm having a contract with you. You are in a lawful contract, and you are in a lawful employment with the employer. And that is where I'm saying that you cannot go into a dual employment with my competitor, or however the clause is worded. This is not saying that you cannot work at all. You are working with the current employer, your primary employer, your regular employer, and you are putting a clause in that contract where you say that you cannot work with my competitor. I don't see any
ideally you are
illegal
saying
there.
that employee is a bonded labor for 24 hours. If
Of
he has
course.
signed that contract, that person cannot work anywhere in the personal time. Tomorrow, the company will come and say if somebody is doing household chores, that is also violating the terms and contracts. Term of the
No, but you're
terms
stretching
and
the
condition of the
argument so far.
contract.
No one is saying Jhadu Pocha is working
Yeah.
for Wipro or
No,
Infosys.
ultimately
If
it
you've
will come-
signed up to
ultimately it
Wipro
will come
working
to
with
that.
Infosys, that's a problem, right?
No,
And every
that is not a
organization
problem.
have so
See,
many onerous obligations. Today the employer cannot say that anybody working in the IT sector, you have access to data, to information, to software, to processes, which can be transferred, which can be exchanged, which can be, and how does the organization here deals with that? So all those things also have to be considered. There are privacy laws. You have access. There might be certain other organizations which have the employees have access to so much of private data. And now if they work for two companies, how is one company supposed to be responsible for the privacy law? You have access, you go to another company, you can share that. I mean, not you, I mean, and an employee can share that. So I'm just saying from the employer's point of view, today how the law stand is that Section 27 doesn't say that you cannot work at all. You have to either work for me or nothing. I mean, it is giving you an employment. It is not saying that you don't work for me also, you don't work. It can come into picture if it says you for henceforth you will not work for
but
anyone.
that contract restricts the employee and it is for only 9 hours of the workday. It is not beyond that, right? Or is it beyond that
Rahul,
also?
I'm sorry, I didn't get you. Can you please repeat?
Now, what I'm saying is the contract between the employer and the employee is for 9 hours a day, or is it beyond that also? So in that private time of that employee, apart from the work time, what he has committed to the organization, if he does something, or if it is a gig job also, is it a crime?
No, but it depends. It depends, Harpreet, on what you are doing. If you
Yes,
are
exactly.
driving
Correct.
an Ola or an Uber, working with
Yes.
Wipro, that's not a problem. If
Rahul,
you're
there is a
working with
distinction
Wipro
there.
and helping out Infosys, that's a very clear problem. I don't know why you don't see that.
And I
Sir,
think the
that is not
Wipro
Absolutely,
officially
Rahul.
possible. Ethically, that is not possible, because no company no
Absolutely,
company in
Rahul. So-
IT sector provides a contractual level job without submitting a
Okay,
PF.
so you're throwing
No
it
IT
back.
sector
You're
companies
throwing
do
it
that.
back at the companies. Whoever the 300 employees were working for, Prabir Jha, he's questioning the HR practices of those competitors of Wipro, saying, how did you give this guy a contract? Did you not know that he was working for Wipro? And if he was, where were your background checks? Which means you too signed up for something that you knew was illegal, Prabir Jha.
Yes, so Rahul, very clearly there is one which is a contractual, and we can do hair splitting till the cows come home, right? What the law allows, what the law will evolve to. I think there are process gaps, but from my point of view, anything which was contractually accepted will be valid till it is renegotiated. But I still want to raise a fundamental issue, and it's not a broad swipe. I think it's a huge issue for leadership if companies to stop, pause and reflect that the labor market is evolving and changing. So it's not about doing some post facto decisions on 300 people, etc. Is this going to attract the best of talent? Is this what is going to build the most innovative culture? Is this going to build leadership which is truly human and not humanoid? I think these are fundamental issues which go beyond legal arguments and legal constructs.
No, but when you
and
talk
I believe
about
that the most progressive employees and the
renegotiation-
best winners of
No, but when you talk about renegotiation, the bargaining power is loaded with the management and the HR department. Where does the employee, like a regular coder, let's assume it's some hotshot anchor or some talent in a cinema production house, that's different. But if it is just a regular employee, if it's just a regular coder doing a regular job in a big company, he hardly has any negotiating power. If he goes to the HR department and says, renegotiate my contract, will they listen to him? They won't.
But Rahul, that's where the legal regime has to be more
individually.
Prabir.
Individually,
Rahul,
the
let me
person is
share
at a
something
discount
that
because
I've
you
been
cannot
reading.
compete
So-
against the might of an organization.
Let Prabir go on. This usually happens in a political debate where our guests are speaking over each other, but I see everyone's excited and charged up, which is great. Let Prabir complete and I go across the table. Yes, Prabir, go on.
Yes, so individually you can't take the might of an organization on. There's no debate about that. But I think the more important thing is what is the learning and lesson of this issue? One is to fight it legally, and I'm sure individuals or 300 of them will fight with that organization. And that is for the courts to decide. But I think for me, the larger strategic HR takeaway is the winds of change are very clear. You will need to decide what kind of contractual relationships make sense for you as an organization. And for individuals, they will also need to decide, do I need all the perks and protection, including medical cover and whatever else of an organization, and continue to do whatever else that I do? Because it is finally an issue of mutual consent and
That's
agreement.
an important
I think
point
this
that you
is
make.
where the gap is very deep.
A
That's
proper
very deep gap.
employment contract has certain benefits
Rahul-
in terms. Just 1 second. I want to go across to Rituparna Chakrabarti. She hasn't spoken for a bit. There is gratuity, insurance, and a lot of other services and facilities which you have access to with this kind of contract. And therefore, if it's just man hours for payment, then don't expect all the other services. Employees here expect all the frills that come with being in a proper job, and yet don't want to sign up for and deliver on their end of the bargain.
So I guess I think it's very important to remind ourselves we're talking about the tech sector, the technology sector, which by far has the most progressive employment policies that any employee in the Indian context, and that's why it's a sector that every kid wants to go and join. So And if that sector has a particular expectation of non-compete, especially in work, and given the nature of their work, their codes are everything, is existential for them, and you've signed up on the dotted line to honor it, I don't think this generic corporate bashing is obviously going to get us anywhere. We can discuss whether that flexibility should be made offered to the employees and we should renegotiate. But you know, we should look at it as marriage. This whole conversation is about marriage, where two people have decided that they're going to be exclusive to each other, and suddenly one person, without informing the other, wants an open relationship. So I think that's the crux of the matter, that this is not about anyone taking away anyone's choices, neither the employers or the employees here. If that's what you want, come to the table, renegotiate, but you cannot have the
but that's much easier said than done. One second, you know, I disagree with your analogy about this being a marriage, because in a marriage, husband and wife are equal. In an employee-employer relationship, employee is not equal to the employer. If a regular coder...
That's a wrong way of looking at it.
You said marriage, so I'm citing that back at you. You called it a marriage. I'm saying it's not a marriage because it's not equal.
Yes, sir. Employment is a contract. Marriage is not a contract. Emotions are connected in the marriage, whereas employer-employee relationship is strictly for professional.
It is professional and also it is equal, by the way. It is not that one side has an upper hand, and I don't think we should get that confused. What I'm saying is there are employment rights, by the way, as a permanent employee of the organization. For example, your parents who are covered under the group Mediclaim policy have an ailment at that point, and and that happens, by the way, outside of work.
But Rituparna, surely we must accept reality for what it is. A relationship between an employer and an employee is not an equal relationship.
I don't agree with you on that, Rahul. Absolutely not. That it's not an equal relationship.
You think it's an equal relationship?
Rahul, you could say the same for marriage.
I think it's an equal relationship. Otherwise, you're essentially...
Today...
Yeah, Dr. Rajan, go on.
Rahul, yeah, so what I'm saying is there is what is ideal and what is not. Every marriage is not a marriage of equals, you know it. And that's why I'm saying there is a distinction between understanding whether you're a full-time employee or you're a gig employee. When you're a full-time, you're looking at a mutually invested relationship. When you're talking of a gig, then you need to be prepared for a transaction relationship. There is no denying the fact that the future of work is evolving. There is no denying the fact that we require an equitable model of employment, where all stakeholders' interests are protected, where you are able to ensure that on one hand you take care of enterprise objectives, on the other side you protect individual rights. But there's something I want to bring to your notice. If you have read those who have supported the argument saying we would encourage moonlighting and let us go ahead with it, there are caveats in their comments. The caveats include full disclosure. Correct. Full disclosure essentially means it gives me the veto to say yes or no, which is implied. It indicates that you have to follow my ethics and values, which means it's organizational ethics and values. The individual might have a different point of view. It also says no violation as long as there's no violation of IP and access to information.
The employee should
so
go
a lot of these conditions that have been
rules.
Put.
No, but why should he not follow rules?
So,
you signed up for those rules.
To what extent? Till 9 hours a day, if he is following the protocols and ethics of the organization, then after 9 hours when he has gone home, does that same ethics and contractual whatever the...
There is a difference. There is a difference between being... honestly, Rahul, there is a difference between a software engineer writing software for a competitor vis-a-vis doing Uber at the evening.
Sure.
I think there is a distinction, and somewhere we're missing the bus there.
I think that's an important point. This debate has so many different layers.
The whole debate really is around why is it an organization...
Go on, complete what you're saying, Dr. Rajan.
Yeah, so I'm saying somewhere you have... So I reiterate what I'm saying. Now, if you're talking about, let's say, an IT enterprise, and the whole concept came into fore because Provident Fund Department had one employee having 2 accounts because he was serving 2 employees. Now, the whole question really is that, is it the same for a software engineer in a software company doing work for a competitor in his spare time, even though it is his time. That is 8 hours he is there at work and then the rest of the time is mine. If you take that position, there is a difference between him actually writing software for a competitor where the possibility of IP gets a little muddy. On the other hand, being an Uber driver. I don't think organizations would have had such an issue if you were actually getting additional income through doing things like running a taxi at the end of the day. The moment you're actually getting into a realm of my impacting the other party's business, then I think the concept of ethics and values between the letter and spirit comes to the fore.
Okay, we've had a very fascinating debate. There are so many shades and layers to this conversation. We've been able to bring some of them out today. This is a debate that I think will continue to unravel in the days and weeks to come, and we'll track this very closely. And I also see a big generational difference. We had this debate in our newsroom in the afternoon, how the older employees versus the younger lot perceive the same question. So there is a question of differing attitudes. How managements and employees see this is also very clearly different, and I completely disagree, and I want to chat with her offline as well, how she thinks a relationship between an employer and an employee is an equal relationship. It most certainly isn't, but for some reason Ritu Panda suggests that it is. But we'll debate that another time. For joining us on this broadcast, Harpreet Singh Saluja for presenting the employee's perspective, Varsha Kriplani for a legal perspective, Prabir Jha, Dr. Rajan, Ritu Panda, fine practitioners of HR practices in our country. Thank you for lighting up this debate on moonlighting with your sharp insights.